This is going to be an interesting episode of Culture Shock. I trust that it will find the right people, but if nothing else, I need to get this off my chest. The search warrant gives us more detail about this literal house of horrors that Jodi and Ruby had these children in. The details have made me physically ill the entire day. No exaggeration, I have been so sick to my stomach. Giant trigger warning. We've been aware since day one that both children found in Hildebrandt's home were malnourished and emaciated and extremely thin and weak. We knew about the duct tape around the 12-year-old boy's ankles and wrists, right? Like, it's terrible, it's awful, it's incredibly upsetting and hard to fathom. This is the part that has just made me so sick all day. According to this search warrant, when the authorities interviewed the child right then and there on site, this 12-year-old boy stated that the lacerations found under the duct tape were from the rope that, quote, Jodi used to tie him to the ground. And that they used a mixture of honey and cayenne pepper to dress the wounds. As if this torture that they were already going through wasn't enough, this is just next level inhumane child torture. And of course, we believe the child. We always believe the victim. But to add more credibility to his statement, during the search warrant, they found gauze with the solution on it. They found saran wrap that was used to bind the wounds, the duct tape. They also found 2 bowls and spoons with a red solution, which is assumed to be the cayenne honey mixture. Fuck her. They also found 2 pairs of handcuffs, 3 carabiners. Do you guys know what carabiners are? They found 3 of those, as well as 3 different sections of rope. So they also found a lot of miscellaneous papers, sticky notes, it says, and a journal. My first thought was on the side of hope. Probably misplaced hope, but hope that maybe it's even more incriminating, outlining in her own writing her crimes. Okay, but realistically, we've heard from Jodi's niece about how she was tortured by Jodi as a child, and one of the things that Jodi would make her do is confess and write down her sins, even ones she had never committed, but make her confess to these sins Jodi was convinced that she had done, and she would write it down on paper. It's so messed up, but even more so than that, it's essentially false confessions from a child. False confessions as a result of torture tactics. Children who haven't even hit puberty. I think that's one thing that really gets me with this case is Jodi doesn't have a victim type. Anyone and everyone could be a victim of Jodi under the right circumstances. She targets adults, she targets men, she targets women, she targets children. There's no length she isn't willing to go. I feel like based on what we know so far, Jodi has definitely been pulling the strings on escalating it to this point. However, I also fully believe, because I think 2 things can be true at once. She may be pulling the strings, but I fully believe Ruby and Kevin were terrible parents before this. That's another really dark side of religion, not just with their faith, with many religious institutions, is that Jodi, for example, was recommended by the church. Jodi was the counselor for their teenage son before she was working with them at Connexions, right? The Mormon church knew about her license being suspended before. We all have eyeballs. A quick Google search will show you the decade of horrible reviews she has online and the lives that she has destroyed. There are police reports. There are documents. There's proof that Jodi has been a horrible, abusive person operating as a licensed counselor for a long time. This is not new information. It's new information to us, the public, because the church has done its due diligence in covering it up, in hiding it, in excusing it, in continuing to recommend her and paying for the counseling services that she gives their congregants. They've paid for those therapy sessions to her out of the church's funds. So we will also be holding the church accountable. So many people take their extreme loyalty to a religious institution that gives them guidance and direction, and they follow it blindly, full of trust, full of faith, whatever you want to call it. They will go to the ends of the earth and do horrible, awful things because the church signed off on it. It gives already abusive parents and individuals further validation that what they're doing is okay because the church nods their head at it, or the church gives the green light and funds it. That's what high control and high demand religious institutions do. You become so reliant and trusting of their guidance and their counseling that you disregard your own moral compass. And when you are putting all your eggs in your religious institution's basket, and they're telling you that they're hearing directly from God these directions, these orders, these prophecies, these ordained people, it causes your moral compass to get pushed to the back. It causes you to question what you know to be right in your gut, and it causes you to behave in super fanatical, abusive ways that harm other people. And yet you feel justified in the harm that you're causing because it's through the lens of a higher power. When you start believing that you or your organization knows everything and is right about everything when it comes to teachings, your doctrine, your beliefs, that's when it becomes dangerous, because then you are easily manipulated into harming your own flesh and blood. You're manipulated into harming your own children. I am not anti-religion. I love that everyone has freedom of religious expression here in the United States, but what I don't love is when the umbrella of a religious institution harbors the people that are hurting others, ignoring the things happening right in front of them, funding the ones behind it, always forgiving the abusers and never believing the victims. And I'm so sick of it. Like, I just have no tolerance for that. It's not freedom of religion at that point. It's freedom to justify abuse. And I would be very careful about coming to defend your religious institution and saying, like, those are people hurting you, not God hurting you. Literally, if the outsiders looking in have to judge your religion, have to observe your religion based on leadership's actions, you should be the one wanting to dismantle your own institution at that point. If your beliefs are in the actual faith and not the men and women behind the faith, why would you want to stand behind an institution that is so adamantly preserving abusers? Don't come for the people exposing the abuse. You should be going for your leaders who are doing nothing about the abuse happening in your churches every day. At some point, it turns into willful ignorance. I speak from a place of experience because if you're new here, hi, I was raised in a religious cult. Okay, I know the Bible front and backwards. I have witnessed and been victim to the power structures and dynamics and the abuse within churches and religious institutions. This ain't my first rodeo, guys. It took me a long time to deconstruct from that life, to leave religion and to figure out what was true and what was man-made and upheld under the name of God. By all means, partake in religious freedom as much as your heart desires. But what you're not going to do is mistake religious freedom for freedom to abuse. Don't become so wrapped up in your religious expression that you ignore or become complicit to the religious abuse that is very prevalent in every religious institution known to mankind.